Everyone see the presentation, I think, and let's start. For the people that hear me and still doesn't know me, I'm Elad. I'm a CSS HTML architect. Beside this, I'm the founder of the community in Israel that called CSS Masters Israel that has more than 6,000 members. Beside of this, I love to write a lot of articles about CSS, and I really write a new article that you can find in this link on medium.com, just published it last week, how CSS works, very interesting with a lot of stuff. And beside of this, I love to speak about CSS in every meetup and in every conference in all around the world. And today we are going to talk about the responsive design best practices, how to do it with CSS, of course. And my first website that I started to create responsive design, it was after I started to work at the One News company in the year 2012. And like every web developer, when you want to learn something new, what you are doing, you're searching in Google the best practices. And I search in Google the best practices for responsive design. And to tell you the truth, I didn't find anything that I liked. And because of that, I started to think, maybe I need to create my own ways to work with responsive design. And let's start to see how I explored and worked with responsive design. Before we even start to write single lines of code in CSS for responsive design, we need to think about how we want to organize our CSS. And I see that a lot of web developers are creating the CSS scene. What is the CSS scene, you may ask? The CSS scene is that you don't care too much about the CSS and you don't organize anything in the CSS. And the CSS is becoming to be in very short time a CSS spaghetti code. And yes, in every programming language, if we are not organizing our code properly, the code is becoming to be spaghetti code. But in CSS, it can get the worst from all the programming languages. The CSS starting to be like one huge CSS file. I like to call it cascading style sheet of files of CSS. That no one can really understand anything in this file. Nothing is organized. It's just throwing their selector without care what comes after what. And when you want to put some new styles because you don't understand anything in this huge file, where are you putting the file? In the bottom of this huge garbage cascading style sheet of file. And after 2 or 3 years, you understand that to work with this CSS, it's almost mission impossible. You're starting to think, maybe you need to create all the CSS again, because to work with this CSS, it's really mission impossible. Okay, then, how can we organize our CSS in a better way? I still think that even in the year of 2021, one of the best way to work and organize the CSS is to use one of the CSS preprocessor. I'm using the SAS preprocessor, I think, in the last 10 years in all my projects. And when we are working with the CSS preprocessor like SAS, we can separate the ideas of CSS into separated files of components. And yes, we want to work in components in CSS, the same way that server-side web developers creating component, the same way that JavaScript developers work in components. And of course, we want to work in CSS in components. But not only that, we want that everyone in the company will think in components, even the web designers, even the project manager. Because when we are talking all of the people that are working in the company in component, we can understand each other a lot better. And in this way, we can create a lot better project for our own company. And now, after we separated the CSS for component files, it's very easy for us to understand the component code, because when we separated the ideas, as you can see here, if we remove all the comments from the beginning, this component, it's only 15 lines of code. It's very short. And yes, I'm from those web developers that writing properties in one line. I think that it's a lot more readable. And yeah, I know that when I'm saying this sentence, everyone thinks that I'm a little bit crazy. And maybe I'm a little bit crazy, but this isn't the point. The point is when you are looking on an old CSS code file. What is an old CSS code file, you may ask? It's a code that you may be written 1 week ago, 1 month, 1 year, 2 years, it doesn't matter. You're starting to forget the structure. But when I'm writing all the properties in one line, I can very easily see all the CSS selector in a glimpse. It's make me the way that I can understand the structure even of the HTML that I'm not seeing right now, because I see that this is a class of breadcrumbs. Here I have another class of breadcrumbs list, breadcrumbs item, and I can immediately understand the structure. And I'm reading the CSS file like the L letter in English. First, I'm searching the selector, and then I'm starting to read all the properties from the left side to the right side. But the most important thing that I want you to take from this specific slide, separated your ideas into separated SAS files, CSS files, because in this way, it's a lot more easier for you to understand the code. You want to write properties in one line, go ahead and do it. You don't want, this isn't the most important thing in this talk. And now let's continue to our next thing. In the responsive design, we have two big methodologies on the web. We have the desktop first methodology and we have the mobile first methodology. First, let's understand why these both methodology exist. The desktop first methodology, why it exists. If we think about it, in the past, when we started to have website, we didn't have mobile device. We have only desktop screens. And we get so used to create first the style for the desktop that when the first mobile device came, we thought, yeah, we first make the desktop screen because this is the majority of the people that are using website. You need to remember this was in 2010, yes? And only then to support the people that have a small narrow device like mobile device that was still minor percent in the beginning of the responsive design time. And beside of this, if you remember, we needed to support browser like Internet Explorer 7 and Internet Explorer 8 that doesn't support responsive design media rules. And if we want that the website will look good in this browser, we are creating first the style for the desktop without any media rules, and only then create a lot of overrides that the website will fit for the narrow screen. And those are the reasons why the desktop first methodology exists. Mobile first methodology. Why mobile first methodologies exist? Mobile first methodology is saying that the layout of the mobile, it's a lot more simple to create. Think about it. What is a mobile layout? Just boxes under boxes under boxes. It's very easy to create a layout for the mobile. And in this way, we can have all the complex thing only when the screen size is getting bigger. And in this way, we can create a lot less overrides on our CSS, and overrides in CSS are evil. And in this specific talk, I will show you a lot of ways how not to do overrides in CSS when it comes to responsive design. The second reason that I'm not using on when I'm creating responsive design is maybe to separate the CSS to separated CSS files. For example, for the mobile device and the bigger screen to load the one CSS basic styles that is correct for all for the mobile and maybe for the bigger and bigger screen. But when we want to add the complex things, like the layout, we can maybe create another CSS file that it will load only in screen size that are bigger, for example, than 500 pixels. And if we want to add another CSS for more bigger styles, for more bigger screen, we can maybe load another CSS file, for example, with minimum width of 1000 pixels. In this way, we can maybe create that the mobile devices will load little bit less CSS, but I'm not using this method because it's maybe creating a little bit better performance, but it's very hard to maintain the code when we are separating the CSS files for different screen sizes. Okay, then we talk about the desktop first methodology and the mobile first methodology. Which is better? Let's save this question to the end of the talk because I want to surprise you with my own answer. But now let's continue to our next thing. Where to put the CSS media queries. Let me think where you are putting the CSS media queries. You have your huge CSS file, and where you are putting the CSS media query? In the bottom of this huge cascading style sheet of file. And what is the problem to put the CSS media query in the bottom of this huge cascading style sheet of file? The problem with that is that you're forgetting that you have style for the same class name of the same component in the top of this huge CSS file. And sometimes you see that you want to change some of the CSS for a specific class name in the HTML. You copy paste the class name, you search it in the CSS file, you find it in the top, you change something in the top, but you forget that you have the same class name in the bottom, in the media query. And every time that you do some changes, something is breaking on your code, and it's becoming to be for you very frustrating to work with responsive design. And of course, if you want to change the class name in the HTML, we update the class name in the HTML, where we search it in the big, huge CSS file, we find it in the top, we update it, and again, we forget that we have the same class name in the bottom, in the media query, and every change is becoming to be so hard to do, and you're always afraid to do changes in responsive design. How can we solve this specific problem? In a very easy way. If we are already working in component files, and when we are working with the CSS preprocessor, in CSS preprocessor, we can put the media role inside the component. And we are earning here two things. The first thing, because it's very short lines of code, every component, we can see the basic style, for example, let's say this is for the mobile, this is for the tablet, and this is for the desktop. And we cannot forget that we have a responsiveness for this specific component, because when we're updating these styles, we are seeing that we have media rules. It's not so far in our eyes. And in this way, we won't forget to check the other screen size for this specific component. But as you may already know, in CSS, we cannot put media rule inside the class name. But the SAS preprocessor understands what you are trying to do. And when we compile this SAS code, it will take these both media rules and will put them outside. But we need a class name, this class name, inside the media rule. And the SAS, when it will compile it, it will copy paste this class name into these both media rules. This is the SAS code before it compiled. And this is the CSS code after it compiled. As you can see, the media rule got outside and the class name of the component is being duplicated inside this both media rule. And in this way, we cannot forget to update the class name in the media rules, because now, if you want to change a class name, we just need to update it only in one place, and the compiler will duplicate it for us in these both media rules. And this is a very nice way to work in responsive design, in components and the media rules inside of the components. Nice. But this maybe can create us a new problem. Think about it. Now, maybe we have 70 component files and we have the same media rules in all of our 70 component files. And what is the problem with that? And here you can see that we have component A in the left side and component B in the right side. The most important things that you need to see that we have the same media rules in all of our components. And this is a good thing. But for me, in the beginning, when I started to create my first responsive website in the Walla News company, in one of the morning, I think 1 month or 2 months after we started, the web designer came to me in one of the morning and she told me, you know what? The tablet design is starting in 551 pixels and it isn't so good for me. Maybe you can change it now to 501, that it will start in 500, a minimum width of 501 pixel. And now I need to update it in all the component files. And beside of this, the smaller media rule need to be changed as well. Instead of finishing on max width of 550 pixel, now it's need to be finished in 500 pixel. And now you need to go over all those 70 component files and to change in 140 places. And if you've done a mistake in one of the components, maybe will notice it only in 2 weeks because you are not going to check now all the 70 components one by one in the browser. And if you will notice it only in 2 weeks, you will be so, it will be so hard to understand why this something is breaking on our browser. And this can be for us a really big problem when we want to update the media rules and we do it by hand. How can we solve this specific problem that we want to change the media rule, but we need a way to change it in an easier way? Because again, we are working with the SAS preprocessor. We can do in SAS, use SAS variables. And now I can put the media rules separated in SAS variable. For example, create a media rule for the mobile device. I called it with a SAS variable with the name of break1. For the tablet devices, I created another SAS variable with the name of break2. For the media rule of the desktop screen, I created another SAS variable with the name of break3. And now you may ask, if it's kind of mobile, tablet, and desktop, why I'm not calling those SAS variables just mobile, tablet, and desktop? But you need to understand something very important. In the real world, we cannot guess really in which type of device we are really using right now, because these days we have thousands type of devices. And to create a good responsive website is to create a website that is fitting to the Windows size. It doesn't matter which type of devices you are using, and don't try to guess which type of device you are using. Let me explain myself. In another morning, one of the project manager came to me when I started to create my first responsive website, and he told me, you know, it's looking amazing on my iPhone, really amazing, amazing, amazing. But when I'm rotating the screen, I'm seeing the tablet mode. And this problem you don't want even to create in your a wrong dialogue in your company, because there isn't such thing, mobile, tablet, and desktop devices. Think about it more. What about the Samsung flip screen? What is this size? This is a mobile, or this is a tablet, or this is a half a tablet? And what about iPad Pro 12.9-inch screen in landscape mode? This is a really big screen size, like a MacBook Pro 13-inch size screen. This is a tablet, or this is a laptop? But the iPad can get now keyboard. And what about this? If this is a tablet that has a keyboard, maybe it's now a laptop. And what about laptop that have touchscreen? This is a laptop, or this is a tablet, and you don't want to try to guess all this thing. A good responsive website is a website that it's fitting for all screen sizes, and it's very important to understand. In this talk, I will still talk with you in mobile, tablet, or desktop, but it's only that you will understand me in a better way. Mobile meaning small screen, tablet meaning medium screen, and desktop meaning big screen. And if you want to give those SAS variables other names like small screen, medium screen, big screen, it is good as well. But please don't call them mobile, tablet, and desktop, because you don't understand how much it's becoming to be very problematic in your own dialogue with your own co-workers. And now let's continue. After we put the media rules on and creating them, those SAS variables, I now just need to implement those SAS variables in our component in this way. As you can see here, a media rule, and to put the SAS variable in the media rule, we need to use the hashtag character and the curly brackets and just put the SAS variable inside of them. And in this way, if we want to update the media rules for all of the components, we need to do it only from one place. Problem is solved. And now let's continue to our next thing. If you don't know these terms, feel good with yourself, open and close breakpoints, because I created those terms. In one of the articles that I was written in 2015, I wrote, I think, responsive design best practices for big projects. And I needed a lot of things to explain for the readers, and I searched in the web the terms that I wanted to find, and I didn't find any terms. And because of that, I created a lot of new words for responsive design, and those are one of them, and we have another one at the end of the talk. But let's explain what those terms, and if you like those terms, it's good. If you don't, what to do? There are now 6 years on the webs, and I'm not going to change them. Opened and closed breakpoints. What is opened and closed breakpoints? Open breakpoints. Open breakpoints is a major rule that has a starting point but doesn't have an endpoint, like major rule with minimum width of 500 pixels. This breakpoint is targeting up for us a screen that are bigger than 500 pixels. It will target screen of 500 pixels, 1000, 2000, and infinite up, because this is an open breakpoint. A closed breakpoint is a breakpoint that has a start and has an end. For example, major rule with minimum width of 500 pixels and maximum width of 1000 pixels. This is a closed range. This major rule will target screen of 500 pixels, 700, 900, but not more than 1000 pixels. And this is very important. Wait a minute, I will just drink something. Okay, which is better to use in most of the cases? Open breakpoints or closed breakpoints? Let's see why to work with open breakpoints and only with open breakpoints can be for us very, very dangerous. The Guardian website was the one of the first amazing responsive website in a big scale in the year 2012, if I'm not mistaken. And it's created with the mobile first, the best architecture for responsive design. We will talk about it after. And it was working with open breakpoints. This is the way that every website wanted to work with responsive design. And what it exactly mean? It means if it's mobile first, the first style of the mobile are written without any major rules. And in a bigger screen, we are overriding the style of the mobile. And in a bigger screen, we are overriding this style that overriding this style. And in a bigger screen, we are overriding this style with that overriding this style that are overriding this style. And what's so bad in overrides in CSS? Everyone do it, no? Because when you learn CSS, everyone teach you that CSS is working the way that we do overrides. But it isn't correct to understand it in this way. In CSS, we can do overrides, but it doesn't mean that it's good to do overrides. And what is so problematic with overrides in CSS? Let's take, for example, this website. When we are debugging our code on the biggest screen, let's say this, and we see all those overrides in the debugging toolbar of Chrome, overrides, override, crossline, 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 the code is becoming to be so unreadable. And this is an easy example only for you to understand me. In the real life, you have something that is coming from here and here, but this is override and this, and why this is affecting and why this isn't affecting. And it becomes very frustrating to do some changes and debug your own code when it's come to CSS and you see all those overrides. But this is only the smaller problem, because the bigger problem that a lot of time there isn't any connection between the style of the mobile to the style of the desktop. And sometimes you will get from the company a request, for example, to add for this medium major rule to add padding of 20 pixels. But they want you to add it only here and not on the bigger screen. But when you adding here padding of 20 pixels, it automatically affects all the bigger and bigger screen. And think about it, what happened to you when you do changes in responsive design? You change one thing in the mobile and everything in the desktop doesn't work for you correctly. And if you're creating desktop website, you do one changing in the desktop and it's affecting you in the mobile. And every time that you need to do some changes in responsive design, it's so hard for you and it's so frustrating to do and change things with responsive design. Because of that, my recommendation for you is to work in the narrow screen only with close ranges of breakpoints, and only in the last breakpoint work with an open one. Let's take it in an exam. Let's say we need a responsive major rule for narrow screen. we can create a measure rule of max width of 500 pixels. This is a closed one, even that we don't have a start, because it's starting on 0 pixel and finish in 500 pixel. The second one will be between 501 pixel, minimum width of 501 pixel, until a maximum width of 1000 pixel. This is another closed range. For the desktop screen, we will use a measure query with minimum width of 1000 pixel, and that's it. It will open range. But this with the open range doesn't affect on the medium screen and the small screen. And the medium doesn't affect the big and the small. And the small doesn't affect the medium and the big screen. Interesting. But sometimes we need, for example, maybe the same style, let's say, for example, for the mobile and tablet, but not for the desktop. What does it mean? What, I need to copy and paste the style of the media query of the mobile to the tablet? We don't want to do copy styles, copy-paste style in CSS. How can we solve this specific problem? Responsive design measure rules, if you didn't know, can get the comma sign, this sign, and can put in measure rules, sometimes if we need, two rules together. And in this way, I can create, for example, a measure rule. Here we can see a measure rule for the tablet and the desktop together. And you need to understand exactly what happened here. This measure rule check if this measure query is correct. If it's correct, please do me these styles. But if it's not correct, check if this measure rule is correct. And again, do me the same style. And in this way, I can create the same style, for example, for two measure rules together. But it can get even more better. You know why? Because in one of the cases that I needed to create for Walla News Company, I had a special request to do. And let me tell you the story. In this website on the desktop screen, I had a component in the side. Let's call this component common box. And in the desktop screen, because it's in the side, this component is very narrow. But when we resize the screen for the tablet mode, all the side is falling under the main, and they are now both big. And when we are narrowing the screen again, this common box is again small because everything is now small. And the company asked me to do the same style for the mobile and the desktop, but different style for the tablet. And now it's very easy to do it because I can create a measure rule. We want mobile and desktop together, no problem. Measure rule, break 1, comma, break 3. And these styles are affecting only in the mobile and the desktop. Now we need different style for the tablet, no problem. Measure rule, break 2 for the tablet. And now the style of the tablet doesn't affect on the mobile and the desktop, and the style of the mobile or the desktop doesn't affect on the tablet. Encapsulation power in responsive design. Very interesting. And now let's go back to the question. Which methodology is better? We have the mobile first methodology and we have the desktop first methodology. But first you need to understand exactly what these both methodologies are saying. The mobile first methodology is saying that the mobile styles we need to write without any measure rules. In mobile first, we're writing the style of the mobile without any measure rules. And in a bigger and bigger screen, we are or adding some CSS or overriding some CSS. The desktop first methodology is saying the opposite thing. First, we're writing the style for the desktop without any measure rules. And in the narrow screen, we are or overriding some CSS or adding some CSS. Before I will answer you this question, I want to show you another real case study. What you're seeing here is the main navigation of the website of the Walla News. And this is how it looks on the desktop screen, and this is how it looks on the mobile tablet screen. And my friend, this is the same HTML, I know. And in the first time, I created it in the desktop first methodology, not because I wanted, only because I needed to support browsers like Internet Explorer 7 and Internet Explorer 8. And it's mean that I wrote the first style, these styles, without any measure rules. And in the measure query of the mobile tablet, I need to override all this style that was looking good, of course, without any major rules, only on the desktop, but on the major query of the mobile tablet, I needed to do so many overrides that I can even understand my own code. It was so problematic. I didn't understand anything. To change this style to this with so many overrides, the code was really unreadable in the mobile tablet major rules. And if I change some style here, of course, it was breaking my code in the mobile. But from the beginning, I understood that even if I was creating this component in the mobile first methodology, it wasn't good enough either. You know why? Think about it. If I'm creating these styles of the mobile without any major rules, it's looking good for the mobile, but I need to do so many overrides in the desktop screen that now the desktop screen code will be so unreadable. And if I change something here, it will break my code here. And after 2 years, the company told me that I don't need to support anymore Internet Explorer 7, Internet Explorer 8. And I had in my mind another idea, how to solve this problem. And I gave you a lot of clues in this talk of how I'm doing it. And because I understand that I'm not using desktop first and I don't using mobile first, I wanted to create to my own solution a new name, a new methodology. I called my new methodology Basic First. And what is exactly Basic First methodology is saying? Think about why they created the mobile first methodology. They saw that the desktop first is so complicated that they needed to create some abstraction, and they thought that the mobile is more abstracted. And it's correct, the mobile is more abstracted than the desktop. But sometimes the mobile isn't enough abstracted, and we need to create another layer of abstraction, the basic layer. And what does exactly mean? How are we working with Basic First? Basic First saying, if you need the same style for all screen sizes, put them without any major rules. But as you saw here in this example, in this specific component, we don't have any connection between the styles of the desktop and the mobile. We have the same HTML, but the styles are so different that I didn't want to create any connection in this specific component. And in this specific component, I took the style of the mobile tablet in the side navigation and just put them in the major rule of break 1, break 2, mobile and tablet together. And think about it, if I didn't write any style in the a common style, I wrote only the style in this major rule. Let's say I only created the style that the navigation bar is on the side. I put this in the major rule of the mobile tablet and still didn't create any style for the desktop. When I will resize the screen to the desktop size, I won't see any styles because these styles are not affecting on the desktop. And now I created the style of the desktop that the main navigation is looking in the top wide and just put them in this major rule of the desktop. And we are earning here so many things. Think about it. It's mean that if I do some changing in the style of the mobile tablet, it doesn't affect on the desktop. If I'm changing the style of the desktop, it doesn't affect on mobile tablet. You do some changing in the style here, it doesn't affect here. I'm changing the style here, it doesn't affect the mobile tablet. This is amazing. You can do changes and not be afraid. You're changing the style of the desktop, it doesn't breaking the mobile. Changing the style of the mobile, it doesn't breaking the desktop. But it's even more better. You know why? Think about it. First, we no longer need to do overrides in CSS. And when we are debugging our code, let's say we are debugging the code in the mobile screen, we only see this major rule, yeah? Because we put only style here for the mobile tablet. And I'm not seeing the style of the desktop. If I will debug the code, for example, for this specific component, in the desktop screen, I won't see the style of the mobile tablet, the encapsulation power. And you're debugging the code and you're seeing only the necessary styles. And it's, of course, you can do with it a lot other things. Every component you need to think if you have common style. In this specific component, I show you the worst case that we don't want to create any connection. But of course, in other components, if you see that you need to use the same style for all screen sizes, write them here. If you see that you need to do some overrides, it means that you've done something wrong, and you just need to put the styles encapsulated in the correct media rule. In this way, writing the common style that are correct for all screen sizes here, and separated the style according to the type of the screen of the size. And this is, I think, one of the best way to do responsive design. In this way, you don't need to be afraid. You can change. I'm changing the style of the mobile tablet, and I'm not checking if it's breaking for me something in the desktop screen. It's so easy to work in this way with responsive design. And this is one of the most important things that I want you to take from this talk. Think in basic first, create the website in a basic way practice. And if we are talking about the main key takeaways of this specific talk, first, separated your ideas into separated CSS components files. After that, prefer to work with closed breakpoints in the smaller ranges, and of course, the last one need to be an open one. Think basic first. If you have common style for all screen sizes, write them without any media rules. If you see that it's not correct for all screen sizes, put them encapsulated in their own correct media rules. A lot of web developers ask for me to see some code that I created in a basic first, but because all the company that I'm working with, the code is already compiled, it's very hard to understand. Because of that, I created this free code pen, this website that you already know, but this is created from scratch, all the HTML, all the SAS code, and you can really see how I'm working with responsive design. And to see all the code, it's one file, but you can see the component because it's very clear that I've separated all the component file, and every project, something like 350 lines of code. You can see all those examples in this collection at CodePen, and I, of course, will put the presentation in the meetup page at the end. And before we finish, my friends, if you want to know more about Basic First, you can read my article in this link. You can follow me via Twitter. I just published just 1 week ago a new article, very interesting article that you can find in my link on Twitter, and you can see all my other articles on my account at medium.com, and you can see all my other stuff in my own website. And my friends, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Elad. Thank you, as always. It was amazing, very clear, and very interesting as well. So thanks for that.
We have some questions?
I don't see any questions, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask Elad privately. I don't know if anyone has any questions. You can activate your camera. But I don't think there are, as I did ask to write them on the chat. So anyway, I'm sure that Elad will be more than happy to answer your questions if you get in touch privately. You will get his contact details in a separate email.
There is a community, CSS Masters, in this link on Facebook. Everyone can ask there, and me and Amit are already there, and you can ask us. We are 2 leaders of this community.
That's fantastic. I'll join it then. Yeah, I'll also include that in the contact email with the presentation and with everything else. So thank you so much for that.
You're all welcome.
It was very, very interesting. So our next speaker is Jonathan, and Jonathan is one of my colleagues. He's a designer, so I think your microphone is up.
Yeah, it's off. Hello, guys. Hi,
Hello.
Hello.
How's it going? You all right?
All good, yeah. I think I'm going to have to, when I start presenting, I'm going to have to turn my video camera off because my connection is a bit crappy.
Ah, that's fine. Don't worry. Yeah, that's good.
Okie dokie.